Do do do, theme song. Do do do, I'm broke so this is my theme song. Do do do, just imagine this is an awesome theme song. Do do, theme song. Hello, welcome to Left of the Box News Bites. Bonjour, bienvenue. I'm Sandy. Well, I've done it. We've hit 300 subscribers to my YouTube channel. Woot woot, yay! Celebrate, I don't know. Take a drink, a shot, coffee, whatever works for you. I don't know. Anyway, to celebrate my 300 subscribers, I'm going to attempt something new. Eventually, I want to get to the point where I can give an actual kind of news show, because I find throughout the week there are so many stories I want to get to, but I just don't have the time. So what I've done is, over the past week, there was a bunch of stories that I thought would be interesting, and I kind of bookmarked them, and I've put them all in a spreadsheet, and I've done a ton of work to get this all together. But what this also means is that it's not going to be scripted. I have like key points that I'll look down to every now and then to make sure that I'm hitting certain beats. But this is, this is going to be me and you, the camera, and the people behind the camera. And yeah, this should be interesting. I don't have the know-how or ability yet to do like a live stream. And I don't know how to like put images on the screen while I'm talking. So it will be a bit of a trick to make reference to things that I can't see. But also it's very difficult for me to interact with nothing. Even if I were to do a live stream, I at least have comments from like the two people watching. So I would get a little bit of feedback that way. So this is a little bit rougher. But thank you so much for doing this with me. It will be a fun experiment. One thing I know I will try to watch out for is the ums and ers and all that sort of stuff, which usually means I'll just end up pausing. Oh, and I also have a habit of repeating a point that I've already made, which I find annoying. Hopefully you don't find so annoying. And I have the tendency to kind of ramble on and on, I'm sure, as you have noticed. Anyway, I don't want to have this to be super long, so I'll try to keep it concise and short. So before I get started, please hit that like button, subscribe, share the video, become a Patreon. Just also a, what do they call it? Oh man, I forgot the name of it. The housekeeping. You might hear weird noises in the background. They are tearing down the building next to me. So I have the choice of shooting during the day with good lighting, with noise, or shooting at night where I look like the living dead. So I'm going with a little bit of noise. And what else was there? I think that's it. That's the problem with not scripting this, is I don't know necessarily the points that I want. Anyway, I'm rambling again. So thank you for doing this with me, and let's get going. The stories that I have tend to be, well, they're not happy stories because, you know, it's from the news. So in between segments, I'll try to lighten the mood as much as I can. I don't have any pre-planned jokes or anything like that, and I'm already screwing up on the uhs. I'll have to work on that. Also, I'm a little bit nervous, so my dyslexia can kick in and I'll end up like stuttering or messing up words. And anyway, I'm still rambling. I will get to the first story. So, Doug Ford, trying to destroy the environment. Not surprising. Recently, Ford has approved 6 new ministerial zoning orders, MZOs, and they allow the government to authorize developments of an area regardless of local rules. I mentioned how he did this. He passed a bill allowing him to do this. It's in my video called The Green Belt, where I go into detail about how he's able to work around these rules. So basically, they have the authority to say, even though the conservation authority of a certain area says, oh, you can't build there because that's sensitive land, he can say, yeah, so I don't care. Not the greatest. And he's also very eager to develop the green belt. Why? Again, if you go back to my video, you'll see during his campaign to become leader of the Conservative Party of Ontario, he was making backroom deals with developers to develop the greenbelt should they support him, and they supported him, and now he's paying back his favors. And what he does is he says that he's claiming to be proud to doing this because it will help the economy, but really it's just helping him and his buddies. A few more detached houses on valuable green space, it won't help the economy. Building factories and stuff on the green space won't necessarily help the economy when there's room within the bounds. There's room within zoning areas already approved for it, but his buddies happen to own the zoning areas for the greenbelt. And the thing is that we need the greenbelt. It is vital for our future and the environment. One of the MZOs that was issued last October was to fast track a distribution warehouse for Amazon. And this would have been Canada's biggest retail warehouse at 4 million square feet. And they were looking at developing this on the lower Duffins Creek wetland in Pickering. See this map that I totally see. Now, as you can see, there's two sections kind of highlighted there. One is the wetland. The other is a golf course, which is actually zoned for construction, which is very nearby. I will now read from an article. Please forgive me, I am horrible at sight reading out loud. From CBC, Ford government's ordered to allow destruction of wetland poised to kick in Friday, which was last Friday. Despite the availability of a nearby Annandale golf course property in Ajax zoned for the warehouse, the Ford government has taken several extraordinary steps to pave the way for the project to be built on the wetland in Pickering. The government issued a ministerial zoning order, MZO, last fall to fast-track the warehouse. In December, it reduced the power of local conservation authorities province-wide to block development. Last week, it introduced a bill to retroactively remove a law that would have prohibited construction on protected wetlands. It ordered the TRCA to issue a development permit for the site by Friday. So as you can tell by that article, Ford has really gone out of his way to make sure this wetland can be developed. Now, why might that be? Well, it might have to do with the Triple Group property who owns that particular piece of land. Their value would skyrocket should they decide to develop the wetland. There's also a push to do it soon because the migratory birds are about to start nesting. And when that happens, there's actually a federal law prohibiting disruptions of the nests and eggs until they hatch and fly off. So they have to kind of destroy it sooner than later, or else they'll have to wait a few months. Now, here's the interesting kind of twist in this story. Amazon decided to pull out of the deal, or to not consider it anymore. You know it's bad when Amazon is the moral authority on this, when they're doing the right thing. Granted, they're not doing the right thing for reasons that we would like, because they actually care about the environment. It's most likely because they realize trying to build over a wetland will cause a lot of issues with people suing, people protesting, people trying to deny the building from happening, all that sort of stuff. And they are profit driven and they don't want to deal with that, especially when there are other viable pieces of land to develop. The approval was sent in last Friday to start the destruction of the wetland. Fortunately, since they pulled out, and the mayor of Pickering has also said that for now they're going to hold off on development and they should probably preserve the wetland. And on top of that, the Triple Group has also said they're not going to develop it at this time. Okay, so how much faith do I have in them? I don't have much faith in them. And it's important for people in that area to keep their eyes open. And as I'm doing this right now, they are vacuuming in the hallway because, you know, the destruction of the building next door wasn't going to be enough noise. So sorry if you can hear that. I know I can. Now, the mayor of Pickering was also a bit, I wouldn't say upset, but disappointed that the Amazon warehouse wouldn't be built in Pickering. And that's because it would have promised 2,000 jobs. And this is where we start running into problems. The environment versus people's jobs. Do you know what would solve this? Universal basic income of some sort. People shouldn't have to be forced to do jobs that will destroy everyone's future. And let's be honest, these jobs wouldn't have been good jobs. Amazon isn't known for treating its employees well. We're going to start running out of viable options for jobs as more things get automated, as more companies streamline for profit's sake, and more people simply will not be able to find a job no matter how hard they look. It's already very difficult to find a job that actually pays a living wage. And we need to protect the environment. We can't destroy the green belt. We need it. So if the government actually stepped up and did their job and offered people an income so they don't have to rely on soul-crushing jobs, that would be the ideal solution to this situation. Okay, so on to my next news story that I kind of have prepped and ready to go. Sounds so official, doesn't it? Long-term care homes, where people go to die. One of my first videos when I started this was a video called Long-Term Lack of Care Homes. And in it I told the story of my grandmother and how she chose to die from pneumonia rather than continue living in the situation at the home. The home itself wasn't in a horrendous state. It wasn't dirty. She was being looked after, but her quality of life had diminished to the point where she no longer wanted to go on. And this is part of the reason why I've been so sensitive to the for-profit home, long-term care home situation here in Ontario, and why it hurts my soul so much to hear about how many of our loved ones have been dying in these homes due to COVID and the lack of care and preparation and precautions these homes are taking. There were a lot of lessons from the first wave that could have been implemented in the second wave. But here in Ontario, the second wave was deadlier in these homes than the first wave. Again from CBC, Ontario rejected proposals to protect long-term care residents, deemed them too expensive, documents show. A commission examining the impact of COVID-19 on Ontario's long-term care system heard the government rejected proposals that could have helped protect vulnerable residents during the second wave because they were deemed too expensive. An infectious disease specialist and member of the province's Science and Advisory Group told the Long-Term Care COVID-19 Commission the proposals included mechanisms for hospitals to support the long-term care sector and to ensure seniors wouldn't be housed 3 or 4 to a room during the second wave. Dr. Alison McGeer said the plans were presented by doctors largely to the Ministry of Health, though some may have gone before the Ministry of Long-Term Care. A number of proposals went to the ministry about what could be done, and all of them were deemed by the ministry to be too expensive, she told the panel. McGeer was one of several doctors to testify before the commission on March 4th regarding the second wave of the pandemic and why it proved deadlier than the first in the long-term care sector. As of last week, nearly 1,900 long-term care residents had died from the virus during the second wave, the doctor said. Staffing was already an issue in long-term care before the pandemic, but it grew worse after the first wave as many lost faith in the system and left the sector. Dr. Samir Sinha, Director of Geriatrics for the Cyanide Health System in University Health Network in Toronto, testified. Even homes with the money to hire more staff were struggling to do so, he said. What differed in Quebec was that the province took away the barriers to training more personal support workers, in part by paying people to undergo the training, Sinha said. As a result, the government was able to hire about 8,000 new personal support workers trained in infection control by October, he said. In comparison, Ontario Homes were forced to increasingly rely on staffing agencies which offered inconsistent training and at times required workers to BYO PPE, or bring your own personal protective equipment, he said. Doug Ford basically said the lives of your loved ones was not worth the cost of doing even the most basic precautions, the most basic help. He has blood on his hands. There's no way around it. They knew what was coming in the second wave after the first wave was a good indication of what would happen. And during that time, they didn't prepare. And with most pandemics, there usually is multiple waves. So it was pretty much guaranteed that there would be some sort of second wave. And they had time to prepare, and they didn't. Because money. He's willing to give $170 million to the shareholders of these homes, but not enough money to train staff and make sure proper protective equipment is available, ventilation is available, spacing is available. And most of these homes are still breaking the rules. The for-profit homes and many of the not-profit homes are run by for-profit companies. And just a reminder, Doug Ford gave Mike Harris the Order of Ontario earlier this year. I have a video about it called Honoring Horrible People. Mike Harris is one of the shareholders of one of these long-term care homes. Just goes to show where his loyalties lie. And the thing that is so devastating about it was all of this was avoidable. From the Washington Post, opinion, the high COVID death rates in Ontario long-term care facilities were avoidable. On March 3rd, Ontario surpassed 7,000 COVID-19 deaths. Yet for a "we're all in this together" pandemic, as the often repeated refrain goes, a breakdown of the mortality figures revealed jarring inequalities, especially for those living in the province's long-term care facilities. Of the 7,014 deaths recorded, 3,745 came from long-term care homes. The extraordinary level of suffering and death in these care facilities was avoidable. For those who could have done better to mitigate or prevent the tragedy ought to be held accountable. Ontario, indeed Canada, ought to look ahead to structural elder care reform, including new or converted public homes and ending for-profit care. We can do better, we need to do better. The goal is to get up to the age where eventually the prospect of going into a long-care term home will be an option, a viable option, just given your age and your well-being. And I hate to have to point this out from a selfish perspective, but if we don't fix it now, that's what you're going to go into. And I say that's selfish because we shouldn't have to wait until it's our problem. There are people in there right now suffering because of what, well, it started back in the Harris, when Mike Harris, again, wonderful guy, started to privatize these homes. And then the Liberals took over the province and they did very little to change the situation. And now Ford is back in and he's making the situation worse. We can change this now. We need to change it now. Lives can be saved by the most basic interventions. Okay, I know these are really heavy stories. I wish there was, again, some comments or something I could make snarky comebacks to. And I'm sorry about my sight reading. It's not the greatest. And if it sounds really good in the actual video, it's because I probably went back afterwards and just re-recorded the audio. If I'm being honest, and I'm being honest. This video will be somewhat of a mess because this is the first time I'm attempting this, and my first time won't be the greatest. Okay, by first time, I mean second. I did try yesterday, but I had technical difficulties, so I did the whole thing just for it to not work out. So that was a long practice run, I guess you could say. But this is part of the time where I really crave that feedback, that interaction. Part of the reason why Bev is my producer is so she could be in the room while I'm doing things like this and I could have that feedback. But due to COVID and her having a paying job, so far we haven't been able to do that. You remember the episode of Star Trek Next Generation? Because I imagine most of the people watching this are somewhat Trekkies, where Data was trying to develop a sense of humor, so he had the holodeck program that was programmed to laugh at him whenever he told a joke. God, what I wouldn't give to have that right now. Anyway, on to, again, these stories aren't uplifting. I'll try my best. They're important, so that's why I'm doing them. In news that will shock no one, Ford said something racist.
Work with Indigenous-led health providers to vaccinate vulnerable urban Indigenous people as part of Phase 1 priority rollout.
The Premier to reply.
Well, again, through you, Mr. Speaker, that was one of our highest priorities to go into the 31 flying communities. And not only did Orange fly in, but the member flew in too to get his vaccine. So thank you for doing that and kind of jumping the line, as I talked to a few chiefs that were pretty upset about that.
Order.
For flying into a community that he doesn't belong, but that's here nor there.
Order.
So that was gross in many ways. And I'll get into how that was gross. But I should also point out that right before he said this comment, he had said another comment of the Indigenous community has never been treated better, ever. Phrases like that, when it's like, we are the least racist people, or the community has never been treated better by anyone else than us. And the way Ford will even talk in the third person sometimes, does that remind you of anyone? It's not that I want to compare Doug Ford to Trump, but yeah, those are things Trump would do, those verbal tics, the way that he would talk about themselves in the third person. It's so weird. I'm used to talking to myself because I'm kind of doing it right now. But if I switched into the third person, that would just be bizarre. Like, Sandy is struggling to do this first video in a way that will be entertaining and informative. See, that's just weird. It's true, but it's weird. And it's just so disingenuous. First of all, I call BS on any other Indigenous leader calling him up and saying, "How dare Sol do this?" And also, Ford isn't the one who gets to determine how well these communities have been treated. The people in the communities gets to determine that. Another reason why this comment was so disgusting is because Sol Mamakwa was actually invited to this community to have his vaccine shot, to help promote the idea and show his people that it was safe and needed to protect the community. Here's the invite that was sent to Sol to ask him to come and demonstrate that this vaccine was safe to take. Ford later privately apologized to him on the phone, and this statement was sent out for people to read. So again, I will attempt to read for you out loud. Earlier today, Premier Ford called MPP Mamakwa for a private conversation to apologize for his comments during question period yesterday. But as NDP MP Matthew Green rightly points out in his tweet, just to be clear, Doug Ford's apology to Sol Mamakwa ought to have been offered in the same form as the insult. That is, publicly and officially on the record in the Ontario Legislature. Yeah. It's in the records. What Ford said to him is in the records. And to not have the courage to own it and go there and publicly apologize just goes to show how much of a coward he is. Sol later released this statement about the phone call.
With little fanfare, the Premier called Mamakwa today and apologized. Mamakwa wouldn't say if he accepted the apology, only that he appreciated the call.
If he's apologizing, I think I would want to see some action. Action speak louder than words. And we need to be able to see those urban indigenous-led vaccine clinics in Toronto, in Thunder Bay. And, they're in a crisis.
So that was almost the end of this particular story. And like I said, I was planning on taping yesterday, which was Sunday, Pi Day, as they say. But because of the technical difficulties, it didn't come through. And during that time, Ford made the situation worse.
Well, I just called him up. I like Saul. I've had him in my office before. We get along quite well. Folks, let's keep in mind, we're two political parties. A lot of stuff goes on in the legislature. Sometimes it gets personal. I apologize that I got a little personal there. My job is defend our party, defend my minister when he's not there. But we're going to we have an incredible relationship with the Indigenous community. I have an incredible relationship with Chief Roseanne Archibald. I talk to her frequently, and we get along so well, along with all the chiefs, and I get along well with Saul. Things are said, we move forward. I apologized, and let's move forward. And the thing is, with Saul and I, we both want the same thing. We want to make sure the First Nations community, Indigenous community is represented, and we want to make sure everyone gets vaccines. So on that note, we're on the same page, but let's not forget, we're from two separate political parties. And there's a lot of politics that get played day in and day out in the ledge over there. And I like Saul. I'll have him in my office, and we're going to work together to do everything we can for the First Nations community. And I'm going to continue working with Chief Archibald. And I got to give a shout out to Greg Rickford. As I told Saul, I can't think of any other government that has done more for the Indigenous community than this government. We're going to continue doing that. We're going to work side by side with Saul and other folks throughout our province. And I just want to give Greg Rickford a shout out and the Regional Chief Roseanne Archibald. I think the world of her.
So he's blaming party politics for his racism. You conservatives must be so proud. He's willing to throw all of you under the bus. And again, just the disgusting language that he uses in his comments, his first comment, this comment, they have never treated them better. I can't get over how much that sounds like Trump, but they say great minds think alike, so I guess the opposite must be true as well. And again, Saul responded, and his answer was phenomenal.
Hello. The Premier once again addressed his comments about me to the media today in his press conference, and I'd like to address what he said. This morning, he had a chance to undo the damage he did to the vaccine rollout for Indigenous people. He had a chance to use his platform and say all Indigenous adults qualify, no matter where you live, and getting your shot is a good thing, not a bad thing. But he didn't do that. The Premier's excuse for lying about Indigenous people not qualifying for the vaccine is that it's just politics. In my experience, people only apologize for racist behavior when they get called out on it. Premier Ford is actually expressing old colonial sentiments about Indigenous peoples. These racist attitudes is that this country was built on. For generations, our people have been hurt by politicians, but who put politics ahead of our lives. This is why we continue to be denied clean drinking water or safe, decent housing. I'm still committed to making sure all Indigenous people get vaccinated. The vaccine is safe. I trust the science. We want to stop the spread. I'm disappointed that the Premier is hurting rather than helping us in that mission. But I will not give up. I am a community person. And that who is I'm accountable to. I have a responsibility to stand up for our people and correct the Premier when he speaks wrong words to the public, when he's not telling the truth. This is what I will continue to do. Miwe.
The way Sol has handled this is far beyond what should be expected of him. He has heart, compassion, empathy, and we need more people like him in our government representing us, because not through only his words, but through his actions, he demonstrates how much he cares for people. Whereas Ford is just so willing to throw his followers under the bus, to insult, to instigate. In the first video, he accuses Sol of going to a community where he doesn't belong. Well, guess what, Ford? You don't belong in Queen's Park, and it's up to us to make sure that after the next election, he never sees the inside of that building again. So, Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario. I have a much better picture of him. Yeah, that one looks about right. Can anyone be surprised that he made these racist comments on the House floor when not too long ago he hurled a misogynistic insult towards Andrea Horwath, the leader of the opposition party? I have a video on it that I made not too long ago to just express my outrage about that situation. This is who Doug Ford is. A racist, misogynist, bully, and a coward. Even in the second video, it wasn't an apology. It was him just saying, it's politics. It's no big deal. It's just what they do. And it's gross. And these are just some of the horrendous things Ford has done. Since he's been in power, he has implemented so many things that will negatively impact the people of Ontario in ways that will be reaching probably for decades. He is in it for himself and his rich buddies. That's it. And here's the very disturbing thing about this. Right now, Ford's approval rating is at about 50% according to polling. And if there is an election right now, he stands a good chance of being reelected. It is up to us to educate those around us, to let them know what Ford is doing. If we remove political party names and have people just vote on policies, more people would vote for the NDP because they back the policies that support the people, that help the people. If you actually told your neighbors, your relatives living out in the rural communities, what Ford has done and pointed out the very specific things, it's hard for them to then still support him, although party loyalty is so strong. And it shouldn't be, because I know for me personally, my loyalty is to my community, to the people around me, to everyone's well-being. Yes, I usually talk very highly of the NDP, but that's because I support a party that supports me. Do I agree with them all the time? No. They don't go far enough, and they tend to really back off of progressive issues right around election season, and that annoys me to no end. They make mistakes, but the intentions are to improve people's well-being, whereas the intentions of the Conservative government and largely the Liberal government is for corporations and the wealthy few. We can't risk another term of Doug Ford. So please talk to your families, talk to your friends. I know these conversations are uncomfortable. I have a video about how to talk to a Trump supporter. It also goes towards Ford as well. Please just try to maybe just chip away at it so that when election time comes again, people see Ford for the fraud he is. Okay, well, hopefully you're still liking this. This is the in-between time where I try to lighten it up somehow, but it's hard for me to banter off of no one. Hopefully you're still enjoying it. I think I just repeated myself again. I gotta get better at that. If you're not enjoying it, okay, why are you still here? Just wondering. But hopefully if you are here, it's a sign that you are liking what I'm doing so far. And this will get better. The more practice I get, this is the second kind of run through I've done of this, the first one that I'm probably going to post. So please be patient with me. These will get better. My learning curve looks pretty much like the second wave of the COVID crisis. So they will get better, hopefully, soon. Now on to other news that doesn't involve Doug Ford, because there's still plenty of bad happening across the country. So the day before, Ford, okay, so I just mentioned his name, but this isn't about him, said his disgusting comments. This happened in the Manitoba legislature.
Madam Speaker, I'm simply pointing out that not one single member of the PC caucus has reached out to the family or has even posted on Twitter, which they are so apt to do when it's Orange Shirt Day, condolences to the family. It is indicative that they just don't give a crap about Indigenous women and girls in this province.
Order. I think the member probably knows full well that the language she was using is unparliamentary in the House, and I'm going to ask her to withdraw that statement. The Honourable Member for St. John's.
I will not.
That was unparliamentary language. Most times when people are asked to withdraw unparliamentary language, it is something that they are most willing to do. Sometimes we get caught up in the passion of something. I'm going to give the member another chance to withdraw those comments and conclude her question. The Honourable Member for St. John's.
There's a slaughter of Indigenous women, and I will not.
Order.
I will not withdraw my comments.
I will give the member one more chance, out of courtesy, to give some further important thought to that, and ask the member one more time if she would be willing to withdraw her unparliamentary comment. The Honourable Member for St. John's.
I will not.
Member has been given 3 chances to withdraw her comments, and I have requested, directed, and instructed the member to do that. I have no alternative but to name Nahanni Fontaine, the Honourable Member for St. John's, pursuant to our rules for disregarding the authority of the Chair, and to direct that she withdraw from the Chamber for the remainder of this sitting day.
NDP MLA Nahanni Fontaine was speaking about how no one in the Progressive Conservative Caucus had contacted the family of Jana Williams, whose body was discovered near the Red River just the previous week. And none of the Conservatives offered a personal condolence to the family or even tweeted about it. Jana would have turned 29 just one day after her body was discovered on March 4th. These precious lives need to be acknowledged. The fact that the government can still so blindly brush off the lives of so many people is sickening. And the behavior of the Premier of Manitoba, Brian Poilievre, was also sickening. He accused Nahanni of making false assertions and kind of scolded her for using this tragedy as a shameless political move. And he says his government is working diligently to pursue the calls for justice from the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry and the recommendation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Yeah, he's not one to talk. He's now using it as a political ploy. He's the one making assertions towards her. Conservatives seem to have this really bad habit of projecting onto other people what they themselves do. And it is gross and disturbing. Nahanni, again, she has, like Soul, she has heart, compassion, empathy. You could tell in the video how much this is tearing her up apart, and I don't blame her. It hurts, especially when it's people of your community that are constantly being murdered, going missing, and nothing is getting done. Yes, we had the commission. There were recommendations, but what really has actually been done about it from governments on every level? Now, some of you might be noticing that that was a very sloppy cut, and the lighting is very different right now. That's because it is. Since I have to edit in the videos after I've made my video, I don't get to watch them fresh. And so sometimes there's a very important point I'll want to make, but then I forget. And right now is one of those times. With this, I just wanted to point out the hypocrisy of this, the misogyny of it, the racism of it. Why did Nahanni get kicked out? She said the word crap and didn't apologize. She shouldn't have to. All of her anger, all of her rage, it is well warranted, and it's hard not to feel it myself as well. And being able to compose herself enough to just use the vile, horrendous word of crap shows she has a lot more restraint than I do, and that's very admirable. Admirable? It's been a long day. I've been up since 5:30. I don't know how to speak anymore. Sorry. And I didn't mean for this to come across as a completely different tone. Yeah, sorry about this. Anyway, I'll finish my point quickly because I'm rambling again. So she said the word crap. There's far worse words out there. It's not a curse word in any stretch of the imagination. And yet, Doug Ford can get away with saying misogynistic comments, racist comments on the floor multiple times. And he has never once been told to leave. And here's the thing. Should the Speaker of the House have actually called him out on any of the comments that he made, he would instantly cry cancel culture. That people are being too sensitive and how dare they do this. And make it all about, this stupid sensitivity and all that sort of stuff. And they would whine, and he would whine and complain like the baby he is. If nothing else within the government, can we at least hold everyone to the same standard? Because that alone would flush out a lot of the crap. Now back to the previously recorded video. The thing about people like Soul and Nahanni, when they go into government, it just shows so much strength of character. Indigenous peoples struggle to be part of the government that has harmed their communities so much. And then some people in their communities can be very upset with them for getting involved with the government. What they go through on a daily basis is more than any of these white male entitled premiers could handle in a lifetime. Brian and Doug, they are cowards. They have no heart, no compassion, no empathy. And yet somehow they are the ones running the provinces when people like Soul and Nahanni are still just fighting to be heard. We need to hear them. Yes, I grew up benefiting from a settler culture. I'm still benefiting from that culture. It wasn't until I was an adult that I actually started to learn the full scope of what had happened, because of course it wasn't really properly taught in our schools. And the more I learn, the more horrified I've become. And it's uncomfortable. And it should be. And I never want to go back to being comfortable again unless it's because they have received the justice they damn well deserve. I know there's very little that I can do, and I'm still learning how I might be able to support them. And I'm still going to make mistakes in how I do it. But it's on me to improve on that. It's on me to change my behavior. And every day, I am constantly trying to be a better person and be a better voice. Oh, yeah, heavy stories. Maybe next time I should pick a fluffier story to maybe put somewhere in this, because the next ones aren't going to be any better. And I'm going to try to be a little bit more concise as I go through them. It's still hard for me to figure out how to say what I want to say without it being scripted, which is why I prefer to script things, but it takes forever to do that. And sometimes you spontaneously say things that could be interesting or funny or thoughtful, and then completely forget it if you don't immediately write it down or be looking at the camera as it happens. And at the same time, the camera is going to also capture really stupid things that I say and do. And yeah, those are being edited out completely. Next story. Lionel Desmond, an Afghanistan vet and former infantry soldier, left the military health care system, where he was receiving the supports and treatment he needed, to move from Quebec back to his home community in Nova Scotia. That meant at that time he had to transition over to a civilian healthcare system. In that system, he tried desperately hard to get the treatment he needed because he suffered complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and he went to about 6 different doctors to try to find the treatment. I can't imagine the torment that was going on in his head as somebody who also suffers from mental health issues, nowhere near as severe as him. It hurts when I hear stories like this. I know from personal experience, I've had to seek out my own help when I'm in crisis. But when you're in crisis, you need to be focusing on keeping yourself safe. Trying to find help, being rejected for help, can be detrimental. One time, right after a suicide attempt, it was on me to look at local counseling clinics, the ones that are free. And I would call them up, and many of them would say, well, you've got problems. And they couldn't take me on because my issues were too severe for what they could handle. Because normally they would handle things like you just lost your job and you're upset, or your relationship is in shambles, or you need direction in your life. But when it comes to somebody who's actually in crisis, that's out of their scope. And so Lionel was desperately seeking help from different sources right up until January 2nd, 2017. The day before he fatally shot his wife, Shanna, his daughter, Aaliyah, and his mother, Brenda, and then finally himself. This never should have happened. This beautiful family should still be here because he should have received the help he needed. When we say Canada has universal health care, it is leaving out massive parts of that care. Mental health is not covered, which means people like him are allowed to fall through the cracks, as the article states many times over. There was an inquiry made into how this was allowed to happen, but the short answer of it is there is no mental health care in Canada that is free and easily accessible. There are programs that are free depending on which province you're in, depending on which city you're in, but the wait list to get into them can be a year. And people don't have that long to wait. Mental health needs to be taken as seriously as physical health because it can be just as detrimental to people, to the community, to lives as physical ailments. And on top of all of that right now, there's Bill C7, which the Liberals and the Parti Québécois just voted an amendment for to allow people who are disabled and who have mental health issues to apply for MAID, that is, Medical Assistance in Dying. They won't help us to live, but they're more than happy to help us die. This bill really strikes a chord with me, so I'm going to be doing a separate video on this bill and getting into the details of it. But the short of it is this government has made it clear we're not wanted. We're disposable, and they're more than happy to get rid of us. His family should still be here. He should still be here, and he should be getting the treatment he deserves. He served for our country. Our country needed to look after him. Okay. Yeah, keep it. Yeah, this is rough. And again, this is a time when, you know, having somebody to banter with to lighten the mood in between segments kind of helps. Don't worry, I know how to self-care, all that sort of stuff in between these stories, or how I'm going to feel after I've made this video. Because I can understand why people unplug from the news when these are the stories that are in it. But they're important stories, and most stories are a sign of a bigger problem that needs to be talked about, that needs to be dealt with. And when people are turned off from the news, then they often don't know about these important issues, which is why I'm trying to get this show Left of the Box up and going, and why I'm hoping to be able to do more shows like this one in particular, where I go through a whole bunch of stories, because I'm hoping that if I can deliver them in a more, I guess you could say, entertaining way, people will learn about these important stories. So it's something I'm going to have to work on to make it entertaining anyway. I'm working on the entertaining part. I just did an didn't I? Okay, I'm still trying to make sure I do none, because that is how much of a perfectionist I am. This video is going to have so many cuts in this when I'm done to get this out. Anyway, I'm rambling. Again, I have a habit of doing that. I should really move on to the next story. Oh, and by the way, I'm mentioning a lot of stories, and not all of them will be referenced on screen, but all the links to all of the stories that I've been covering is in the description box below, so that you can read into them more and do more research if that's what you care to do. A story from Now Magazine. There has been a freeze on evictions enacted province-wide because of the COVID stay-at-home orders. And this freeze has ended in Toronto, Peel, and North Bay. Now, while this freeze was on, landlords couldn't evict people, but they could still submit eviction applications to the Landlord and Tenant Board. And in January alone, this board conducted 1,431 evictions hearings. I would say the vast majority, or all of them, probably were in the landlord's favor. So now that the freeze is gone, sheriffs can begin removing tenants, and this will force people onto the streets, into crowded homes with friends or family, elder family members who are vulnerable to COVID. And we are in the middle of a, well, not the middle, we are in a housing crisis. We've been in a housing crisis for over a decade. And again, it's one of the stories that just is not getting enough coverage in this country. If you want to know how bad it is, because maybe you haven't needed to find a new place to rent or buy a new home in the past, 10 to 20 years, just do me a favor and look it up. Just look up one-bedroom rentals in your area. Look up the average cost of a detached home in your area. And then you will find out how high these costs are, because, of course, property is an investment. People are not. But the other very tragic thing about this, especially happening right now, and especially with such a high volume happening at the same time of people being evicted, is there was a study that found that lifting eviction moratoriums in 43 states across the United States was associated with increased COVID incidence and mortality. And because that freeze has been lifted here, this is most likely to happen here now that we're, from the looks of it, starting a third wave with very extreme variants of COVID, and a province that isn't doing a very good job of making sure everyone is getting vaccinated. Again, there's just so many things that should be put in place that could have prevented all of this. We should be vaccinated by now. There should be social housing so people aren't being forced onto the streets. Again, a universal basic income of some sort that is tied to the cost of living. All of this, and it's doable. It is doable. There's just no political will to do it. Our government needs to stop making us feel like we should be grateful for them when really they should be grateful for us. It is us, the people, who make this country. We drive the economy. We drive arts and science. We are what makes this country whole. And we hire the government to do a job. They need to do it, or we need to fire them by voting them out. Please, when there's a federal election, provincial election, even pay attention to municipal elections. Get informed, get involved. Hopefully we can start turning the tide. It's difficult, especially with the first past the post, which will be a future video, talking about why that is a horrendous way to do democracy. But we need to do everything we can for our future generations and for our future selves. And yeah, our present selves, because right now the present kind of sucks. Please, get informed, get involved. I'm repeating myself, I'm rambling. I will move on to the next story. The final story for my experimental format is as follows from this CBC article. Alberta MLA was monitored by 5 different police officers, documents show. Over the last 4 years, Lethbridge NDP MLA Shannon Phillips has had suspicions that some members of the Southern Alberta City's police force had been monitoring her. A cache of newly released documents shows she was right. Back in 2017, when Phillips was Alberta's Environment Minister, Lethbridge police officers took photographs of her at a dinner and posted them anonymously on the internet. But Phillips believes there was additional evidence she was being watched. So in August 2020, she put in a request under the Freedom of Information and Protection Privacy Act on herself and the Lethbridge police. What she found was disturbing. The documents revealed that the police accessed files containing personal information about her, but all through this time, there was no investigative purpose given for any of these searches. Also within the report was an alleged incident of someone saying that at a bar they were drugged, and this person believes these drugs were actually meant for Shannon. However, Shannon was never informed of this, and that puts her safety at great risk. She should be made aware of things like this, obviously. As with most women involved in politics, she has been the target of misogynistic, vile correspondence, and some were threatening enough that the province had to provide her with close protection service bodyguards at one point in her first term. Often with these correspondents and the threatening ones, she has to do her own online sleuthing to try to find the identity of these harassers, including the person who actually took the photographs of her at that dinner. When she did some digging, she found that that person was an on-duty police officer. Now, why did he target her? Because she had proposed a plan to phase out off-highway vehicle use on designated trails in Castle Provincial Park, and he didn't like that. He was worried that she might be planning to try more proposals like that, and his freedom to destroy trails using any vehicle he likes just irked him so much that he felt the need to stalk her. And he posted these pictures with information that was incorrect to make it look like she was in the planning process of this. And again, this puts her safety at risk. There were 2 police officers that were implicated in this photography incident, and they were disciplined, but again, they didn't like that. So a new investigation now has to be launched. Phillips knows the new investigation she has instigated may well uncover even more upsetting details, but she says there's a principle at stake. These guys still don't understand that there's a line between you and personal feelings and how you do your job as a law enforcement official, she said. If you cannot find it in yourself to persecute duties in a way that leaves aside your feelings and your little political tantrums, you do not deserve the gun and the badge and the uniform. Yeah. The fact that as soon as a man is challenged by a woman, he turns into a little baby, those people should not be the ones in charge of keeping us safe. And women are so often the target, and people blow up at them for doing the same things men would have done. If it was a man that had proposed banning these vehicles on these trails, do you really think this officer would have stalked him and, took pictures of him and posted them online? No, of course not. But for some reason, when a woman does something like that, it strikes something within them that they feel the need to lash out. I'll refer again to the video that I made on misogyny is the problem in politics. I made that video recently. Please go back and watch it if you haven't already. And it goes into why it's such a problem in politics. And it's often still overlooked as a big issue. Women like her, again, just like with Saul and Nahanni, the amount of harassment and barriers they face and deal with to serve us. Wow. They are doing this for us, because they sure as hell aren't doing it for them. This isn't their political ambition speaking, because nobody would put up with this level of abuse and harassment for a paycheck. They are doing it because they have principles and integrity. And if more people in government were like them, then maybe Canada would actually be like the country I thought it was when I was a child. In your area, if you know a person like them, encourage them to get involved. And you can't just encourage them, you have to support them. You have to be there with them, and you have to help them through this, because those barriers are tough. And we need to find as many ways as possible as tearing them down, because it's about time the government serves us. Okay, so I think those were my stories. I hope you enjoyed them. I hope you found this entertaining. I feel this did actually go a bit more smoothly than my first attempt yesterday. I have no idea how long this is going to be after editing. I'm hoping it's not too long, so I'm just going to make a guess that it is 35 minutes, and we'll see how close it is once I'm done editing out a lot of my mistakes that you will never know about. If you do like this, please leave comments saying so. If you don't like it, you don't need to say anything, because I already have that voice going on in my head. You don't need to help prop that up. But please, if you like it, leave comments, in the comment section, or tweet at me. But if you put them in the comment section, that actually helps my video, just to let me know that you would like to see more videos like this. Because again, there were so many stories I could have gotten to that this could be an hour-long daily segment, and there would still be stories I'm missing out on. It's not going to be, at least not now, because that is a lot of work, and I'm still trying to get the swing of things, and I am rambling yet again. I need to stop that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe if you haven't. Encourage other people to subscribe. We've hit that 300. With your support, we can double that, and then double that, and hopefully double that. And with your support, this channel, this much needed channel in Canada, will succeed, and the stories that people need to know will get out there. It's not about me, because this is pretty torturous at times. And I just feel there's so much going on in this country people don't know about. And if more people knew what was happening, more people would care and more people would get involved. That's the goal. Change the world. Well, we'll start with Canada, then the world. Although I don't know what kind of sway Canada is ever going to have in the world again, because we've done a lot of damage. Anyway, still rambling. I need to stop. So, thank you for watching and stay tuned. I'm Sandy, wishing your tomorrow is better than your today. Say hi, Frodo. Say hi.